Wait, what do you mean we're starting writing? We haven't even done any planning yet. I know. It seems counterintuitive. But if this is your first time writing a novel, or you've tried to write one before and gotten stuck, this technique could change everything for you. I know it did for me. Hi everyone, I'm Deanna, and I'm trying to scribble my way to becoming a traditionally published author. In this video, I'm going to let you in on a technique that cut down the amount of time it takes me to write a first draft by 90%. Which is crazy. But first, quick disclaimers and introductions. As always, you can find details of my credentials on my channel, as well as information on the novel I'm working on, vlogs, all my other videos, it's all there. Also, just as a reminder, obviously this video is part 2 in my series for how to write a novel for beginners in 1 year. So if you're following my suggested timings and you haven't seen the first video yet, you should go back and watch that first. That said, these videos can also be used as standalones for guiding you through specific parts of the novel writing process. So if you're here to get tips about how to test out your novel idea before you start writing full chapters, then you're in the right place. Also, one final reminder, obviously these videos, like I said, are mostly geared towards beginners, but as always I'll be sprinkling in advice for more advanced writers and writers who want to be published in future throughout. Okay, let's get into it. If you watch my first video, you'll know that my #1 piece of writing advice is to be flexible. Yes, it will always appear that big on the screen every single time because it's the most important thing. So the exercise that we'll be doing this week is basically going to be the best way for you to test out the limits of that flexibility and to practice that idea. One of the first things that most writers will discover about themselves is whether they're a planner or a pantser. If you haven't heard these terms, let me explain quickly. A planner or a plotter basically refers to a writer who plans what they're going to write before they do it. Through outlining, character sheets, whatever tools they use, they need a roadmap so that they know where they're going before they start writing. A pantser, as you can probably guess, is the complete opposite of that. It's a writer who just sits down and gets on with it. The term comes from the phrase flying by the seat of your pants, which basically means making things up as you go and just going with the flow of a situation. Also, a lot of writers fall on the spectrum between these two, sometimes called plantsers, which I think I am, where basically they do a little bit of writing or a little bit of flying by the seat of their pants, and they'll have a preference for one, but they'll still use the other when needed. There are also some other designations that some people use. For instance, George R.R. Martin famously coined the idea of a gardener writer who kind of plants seeds in the plot and then more organically allows those seeds to develop over the course of their plot. So again, a kind of a combination between planning and pantsing, but let's not overcomplicate things for now. That's not what today's video is about. The reason I bring all this up is because, hot take alert, I think every writer should be a plantser. And not in the sense that you should have a preference for one or you're not going to be naturally better at one or the other, but that you need the skills of both to successfully finish a novel. Realistically, at some point in the novel writing process, you're going to come across an issue or a hurdle that you're only going to be able to solve by using the other technique that you don't use as often. And actually what we're going to be doing today is a combination of the two approaches that will basically allow you to use pantsing as a planning tool. So what is this magical approach? Well, I'm sure that other writers use it and have probably named it other things. I'm probably just completely ignorant and have never come across it myself. In my world though, I made this up and I made up a name for it, and it has helped me a lot over the last few years, especially since I started doing it, to really speed up my writing process. I call this technique sample scenes. So what is a sample scene? Well, I wanted to give you an example that you were more likely to be familiar with, and regardless of how you feel about it or what you think of the pros or the franchise, I'm going to use an example that definitely made a ton of money because the plot and the characters and the premise are the most important thing in writing when you're trying to sell it, which is compelling to a wide audience. Stephenie Meyer's Twilight. Saying that though, I've actually heard a similar story about loads of other novels, and you probably have a similar story yourself, but I digress. This is just an easy example to look at. So basically the story goes that Stephenie Meyer, the author of Twilight, wrote the book because she had a dream about a specific scene, which she saw so vividly that she simply had to write the story behind it. In case you didn't know, this scene is the part where Edward shows Bella for the first time that he sparkles in the sunlight. So what we're going to do this week is write quick, messy drafts of the equivalent of those scenes for your book in order to rip off the band-aid of dithering and indecision that so many first-time writers come up against when faced with a blank page. I can already hear the protests and I understand where they're coming from. I've been there myself. But Deanna, if I write the scenes now, I won't have anything to look forward to when I'm doing the actual draft. Or But if I write those scenes now, they're not going to be good enough. And if they're not perfect the first time, I'm going to lose all motivation for working on this book. Listen, I get it. Like I said, I've literally been where you are right now, and I'm sure almost every author has too. But let me tell you why those reasons are just the gremlins in your brain trying to stop you from writing. First problem. Look, I'm the last person who's going to begrudge you for wanting a crumb of serotonin in this process. I have all the neurodivergencies, I understand. You want it to be enjoyable, but also, we're going to have to accept that writing isn't always going to be fun, especially if you want to do this as a career, if you want to get published, you're going to have to do some things that you don't want to do, that are scary, that are challenging, and that aren't always fun. That's the truth, there's no way to avoid it, and you're going to have to deal with it if you want to do this with any kind of consistency, or God forbid, make a career out of this. But if it helps, I want you to remember that the opposite is true as well. Writing doesn't have to only be fun once. You're going to have to write this scene over and over again, rewrite it, edit it, read it ad nauseum. And yes, that can get monotonous, but at the same time, writing it the first time isn't the only time that you're going to have fun with this scene. If you enjoy writing something, it's not only going to be enjoyable once. And even if it does get completely stale, you have to remember this is not the only scene that you'll enjoy writing in your book. There are stories and ideas brewing in your brain that you have no idea about at this moment in your subconscious that you're going to like writing just as much as this scene, if not more. So don't be miserly with your joy. As Mary Oliver says in her poem Don't Hesitate, joy was not made to be a crumb. Do not be afraid to enjoy your writing prematurely, whatever that means. There's always going to be more joy in the future. As for the second worry, the worry that you're going to ruin the scene, I'm going to tell you a secret. There's no such thing as ruining a scene. It can't happen because it's impossible. And not because it's impossible to write a bad scene, of course. What I mean is, and I'll be saying this a lot as well, all writing is rewriting. We covered this in the previous video. If you write a version of the scene now and decide it's garbage, it doesn't have to be garbage forever. Whether you're right or not is beside the point. Remember what the most important thing is? Being flexible. If you happen to write a bad version of your vision, you don't have to accept that as the final version. You can change whatever you want and start over as many times as you need to. You are in charge of your craft and the content that comes out of it. One of the biggest mistakes that beginner writers make all the time is being afraid to write badly, when even the pros still write badly sometimes. It's a first draft. And in this case, it's not even a first draft, it's a prequel to a first draft. Sample scenes. The last thing you need to do is feel intimidated. The whole point is to get it out, shake it off, and move on to write better next time. Because the only way to learn literally anything on this earth, unless you're a prodigy, is to do it, look back on what you did, and then do it again. Repeat as needed. You absolutely have to let go of it being perfect, especially of it being perfect the first time you try. And it's easy to fall into this trap because, well, ideas can be perfect, but they're only perfect because they're like Stephanie Meyer's dream, formless, lacking definition or boundaries. They're not real. It's easy for something to be perfect when it's not real yet. To make our vision real, to make our book real, we have to let go of its theoretical perfection and let it be, well, mediocre, or even terrible the first time round. But that's the starting point, right? Maybe I'm preaching to the choir at this point, but if you're still apprehensive about this approach, just imagine writing, like any art that you're approaching as a craft, as a more literal craft, like blacksmithing. Imagine you're a blacksmith that wants to make a sword, the sword being the book in this case. A sample scene, and a first draft too, does not involve shaping the metal at all. In fact, it doesn't even involve heating the metal yet. A first draft is literally you going down into the earth and bringing out the ore that you're going to use. That's it. That's how crude and basic we're starting, because a first draft is literally just the raw material that gets shaped into the book later down the line. And sample scenes are, in essence, a survey of the cave that you're planning to get your ore from, before you spend a bunch of time and effort digging in, trying to find a vein only to realize the cave that you've chosen is actually empty. That, by the way, is why I think sample scenes are so important for beginner writers and are such an effective tool. They help newer or less experienced writers, writers who are perfectionists, writers who get stuck in world building, break the seal of the blank page. If you write sample scenes, when you actually start writing real chapters, you have something written that you can then edit or draw inspiration from if you need to. It also battles that desire that we all have to get things right and perfect the first time that you put pen to paper or hands to keyboard, letting you fail early by basically experimenting with your idea before you start the real thing. Convinced? I hope so, because that was a lot. So how do you actually write a sample scene or scenes in practice? Now there's a bunch of techniques you can use if you already have a basic idea, kind of like the Stephanie Meyer dream thing, but let's address the obvious issue. What if you don't have that at all? What if you're operating off pure vibes for your novel instead of like having a character or a setting, anything really concrete? If you watch my previous video and use that to come up with a pitch for your novel, this might be a bit easier for you because what you basically want to do is use your pitch as a compass to guide you to the right direction. So ideally what you want to do is just set a timer or not, but sit yourself down in front of a blank page, think about your pitch, imagine it as a kind of guiding star and see what your brain comes up with and just write it down. If you're struggling to start writing, the entire key is to answer on the spot without overthinking it, whatever question is preventing you from writing in that moment. Even if you don't think your answer is very good, just try it on for size, whether that's for a couple words, a couple sentences, a couple paragraphs, or a couple pages. So for instance, if you don't know who your main character should be, just pick one. Anyone. Pick a place they're from. Pick a name for them. Hell, if you can't think of anything, just imagine yourself in whatever situation your plot revolves around, just as a starting point. How would you react if you were in the shoes of that character? You're a human being after all. Even when we're not writing about human beings, we kind of still are. And despite our differences, we actually have a lot more in common. And just do that for every question that arises. Part of the exercise and the point is letting go of control and not being afraid to just try something out. And if it doesn't work, no harm, no foul. And once you've done one theoretical sample scene like this, it definitely gets easier to do more of them. After you've kind of gotten through that initial difficult step, here are some more techniques that you can try and use to generate more variations of scenes if you're still struggling to solidify parts of your story like the main character and the point of view and such. 1. Make a list of situations and tropes that might arise in your novel, and just draw from that, just choosing the kinds of scenes that it would be important for you to nail. This will obviously be quite genre dependent, but might also be dependent on you, like what kind of scenes did you decide you wanted to write when you used the previous video's ideas? For example, if you're writing an epic fantasy, maybe you want to try your hand at writing a short court scene, or a jousting or fight scene, or one of your characters slaying a magical beast. Whatever makes the most sense for your plot and whatever you think will kind of form the bread and butter part of your novel, otherwise known as the fun and games. In a similar vein, you can think about which characters will interact the most between each other and see if you can nail a scene where you can get down their chemistry and the way they talk to each other and what makes the relationship special. We've also obviously already discussed this technique, but it's worth bringing up again. I call it getting to the good part. Just like Stephanie Meyer, try out writing the scene that you're most excited to write or the one that you based your book around. And for this, remember that the whole point is to not put pressure on yourself. The entire exercise is supposed to be exploratory and experimental. To help with that, you can try the third technique, iteration. For this, try writing a short scene and then writing it again, changing something. So in one version, it might be in a different setting. In another version, maybe you're using a different character to be the point of view. Change the point of view, change the tense. Just play around with how you can really get the most out of whatever scene you're trying to put together. Some of these changes might be a bit advanced for beginner writers depending on how much experience you've had, and we'll discuss those categories like point of view and stuff more in the actual planning video that is coming, I promise. We are still going to plan. I just don't think it's a good idea to start with planning at this stage necessarily. The point is you want to play around with as many aspects of your novel as you can now so that you have less decisions to make during the planning stage and you're not worrying about them when you actually start writing. The fourth exercise you can try is treating the scenes like a sandbox or asking, what if? What if your character made the complete opposite choice from what you thought they would in the scene? What if instead of falling in love with the love interest, they fell in love with a different character? What if their plan didn't work? What would happen if they failed? This is going to become more relevant when you actually start writing, but do also keep in mind that coincidences are only really good plot elements when they get your characters into trouble, not out of trouble. That's usually considered cheating. Maybe you can get away with it once, but sometimes not even that. One of the other pieces of advice I have is to try treating these scenes when you like them more as a dream, more impermeable. Back to the Stephanie Meyer thing. It's almost like I write a script for these videos, isn't it? What I mean by that is if halfway through a scene you realize that actually a different character would make more sense as the center of it, or a different setting or something, just change it right there and then. Don't worry about the fact that it doesn't make sense with the rest of the scene, and just make a note for yourself that you made that change either in the margins or in a different notebook, however you want to do it. And then if you end up using that scene, you can go back and fix that later. I would say this is a good technique to practice for when you actually start drafting as well. It can really cut down on edit times if you're not worrying about the fact that, oh, well, it doesn't read all the way through because, well, no one should be reading your first draft anyway except you, really. As always, it's about being flexible. I do have to issue a warning though. This is also the stage at which you might realize that actually the novel idea you came up with doesn't work. Maybe you start to write a sample scene and realize that there's actually a huge plot hole, or that the main character that the plot demands just isn't the main character that you've come up with so far, or the setting is completely wrong for the tone that you want to take. If you find that out though, that's amazing. It means the sample scenes are doing their job because you've caught a problem that you otherwise wouldn't have. And instead of losing thousands of words and getting discouraged, you've only lost a few minutes of your time. Now you have a chance to fix the issue, either by trying out a different sample scene where you try and change whatever element doesn't work, or by going back to the drawing board and coming up with a new novel idea and pitch. Obviously though, that's just one possible outcome of this exercise. In the end, everyone's results will probably vary quite a bit, but the main two things that I'm really hoping everyone does get out of this is A, you manage to pull on some threads that really resonate with you for your project, whether that's your main character's voice, details about the setting, or maybe the first scene that you want the novel to open with, though obviously don't expect all of these to be nailed down. And B, maybe more importantly, I hope it allows everyone, especially new writers, to break the seal of apprehension of staring at a blank page. You've already written something, and regardless of the quality, that's already a huge part of the battle. And that's it for today's video. Good luck with your sample scenes, whether you're writing at your own pace or following along with these videos and are going to write over the course of the next week. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe so you don't miss next week's video where we're going to step back with our red yarn and highlighters and actually plan out the whole novel from start to finish. And as always, if you have any questions or if you want to tell me to fly into the sun for making you do something as scary and non-intuitive as writing without a plan, please leave a comment down below. But in either case, I hope you're doing well, Happy New Year, and I hope I'll see you next week. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!